everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Producers Roundtable Best Motion Picture presented by the Canadian Media Producers Association at the 2022 Members Lounge. My name is Mara Gour-Mercado and I am the Executive Director at l'Académie Section Québec. Members Lounge 2022 is presented by Canadian Media Producers Association, which represents hundreds of Canada's independent producers. They are the people who make the shows and movies you love. Members Lounge 2022 is also made possible with the support of our programming partners, Directors Guild of Canada in Ontario, William F. White International, Bell Fund, Le Fond Bell, Boat Rocker, NABIT 700M Unifor, Telfilm Canada, La Banque Nationale, le Bureau du cinéma et de la télévision du Québec, the Independent Production Fund, Panavision, and SODEC. If you have any questions for today's speakers, please put them in the Q&A and we'll save some time for those at the end of the session. And with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel, all of whom have produced one of the 5 films nominated this year for Best Motion Picture at the Canadian Screen Awards. First, we have Gharrett Patrick Paon, the producer of WILDHOOD, directed by Bretton Hanham and nominated for 8 Canadian Screen Awards. An actor turned producer and president of Rebel Road Films, he has also recently produced a short film, The Mohole, which premiered at South by Southwest and won Best Live Action Short at Palm Springs Short Fest. Next is Déry, producer of Les Oiseaux Ivres, directed by Ivan Grabovich, and nominated for 6 Canadian Screen Awards. He is the founder of Microscope, and with his partner Kim McCraw, has produced over 25 features with directors such as Louise Archambault, Philippe Falardeau, and Denny Villeneuve. Shasha Nakhai is the producer of Scarborough, which she co-directed with Rich Williamson, and is nominated for 11 Canadian Screen Awards. Her work has aired on the BBC, CBC, ZDF, and Arte. Screened at the Museum of Modern Art, was named TIFF's Top 10 and shortlisted for an Oscar. Tara Woodbury is the producer of Night Raiders, directed by Goulet, and nominated for 11 Canadian Screen Awards. Tara also previously developed and EP'd the smash medical hit Transplant for CTV and NBC, and is Netflix Canada's first content executive. Yanick Létourneau is the producer of La Nuit des Rois, a Canadian co-production with France, Ivory Coast, and Senegal, directed by Philippe Lacote and nominated for 2 Canadian Screen Awards. Yanick is the owner and co-founder of PERIPHERIA, a film production company in Montreal dedicated to bringing director stories to international audiences. And I will pass it off to our moderator for today's session, Claudia Hébert. Claudia is a radio host and culture reporter for Radio-Canada. She can be heard on various programs like Tout un matin, Culture Club, and On dira ce qu'on voudra. Thank you and welcome.
Merci, Mara. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you to my guests, my panelists today. I'd like to go around first and ask all of you how you got involved with your films and why you got involved with those films. Maybe we start with Garrett, with WILDHOOD, coming of age, a teenager looking for his mother, reconnecting with his roots, discovering his sexuality. How did you get to meet with director Bretton Hanham, and why did you want to carry this project with him?
Well, my kind of philosophy producing is first try to look at the filmmakers who are your friends. And so I've been friends with Bretton since I was 16. They were actually the first person to cast me in a short film in my past life as an actor. And so when I got into the CFC's Producers Lab in 2017, they were the first person that I reached out to see what they were working on. And they sent me this film. And I just immediately resonated with Link's journey of trying to find a parent you didn't know. I've never met my father. And so as a kid, I remember so many nights falling asleep and imagining what a journey like this could be like for myself. And so when I read Link's journey, I saw myself in a different way through this character, and knew that it would resonate with audiences on so many different levels. You know, it's a, like you say, it's a coming of age story. It's an identity drama. It's a road trip film. And at the heart of it is this rebellious character who I think a lot of both Indigenous and settler youth could identify with that kind of rebellious soul. And so I thought it was really important to support my friend on this film. And it was also just a great opportunity for me to learn how to kind of take a film from development through to the finish line. I didn't anticipate that we'd do it through a pandemic, but that was a great, you know, great learning experience as well.
Déry with Drunken Birds, Les Oiseaux Ivres. The film is between a drug cartel in Mexico and then migrant workers on a farm in Quebec. How did you get involved on that project with Ivan Garbovich?
Sorry about that. We were actually big fans of Ivan's first feature film called Romeo's, which he'd made almost 10 years ago.
A good 10 years ago, yeah.
A good 10 years ago. And we have the chance of working with his wife, Sarah Mishara, a great DP with whom we worked on I would say 5 or 6 movies, very talented DP. And we got to know Ivan through Sarah. And we actually started developing a feature project with Sarah as a screenwriter, and Ivan was involved in meetings because he was going to direct it eventually, but it was very much Sarah who was writing it. And to be quite frank, the first few meetings with Ivan, even though we liked his film a lot, didn't go that well, and he was very protective of his wife. And through the years of working with him and being involved with him on Sarah's project, we got to tame him and to you know, get to know him better. And at some point in time, I think he felt at ease to, you know, pitch a project of his. Sarah's movie was actually difficult to develop and was like a really big movie that we didn't see necessarily, you know, getting it off the ground quite rapidly. Ivan had a script that he'd written a long time ago, and he pitched it to us, and we read it. It was already very close to what the movie is today. He had co-written it with Sarah, but it was his idea from the get-go, and we were just completely floored by the script. I would say it was already very precise, even though it's a you know, intertwining stories with back and forth in time, and it's quite complex in structure in the end in the movie. And it was not exactly, but it was quite similar in the script, and we just loved it. It reminded us of the way we felt with my producing partner Kim McCraw, who read it at the same time, and it reminded us in a way of the way we felt when we read Incendie, a Denny Villeneuve movie that we produced about 10 years ago as well. And we just fell in love with it. And yeah, in terms of subject matter, it was also quite interesting to us. It felt timely. It was ambitious in its scope. We liked the fact that it took place in rural Quebec, a little bit in Montreal, but also in Mexico.
It's interesting because many projects are coming up now about migrant workers working on farms, and you kind of opened the trend. You came first before those other projects.
There's a few actually. One of the things Yvan showed us along the way is an NFB documentary that dates back from, I think, maybe 7 or 8 years ago about the subject, a short documentary that's actually terrific as well. And
let's hear from Tara for Night Raiders. It's a dystopian film in the future where children are taken away from their parents, and it's in the future, but it reminds us of the past, of their residential school for sure. How did you get involved on Denny's Goulet first film?
Yeah, Danis and I had actually worked together on a short film called Awakening in 2012, so long ago. And I was story editing it with her, and we really liked collaborating together. And I was really blown away by her vision and her talent. So I approached her after we had worked on the short together and asked if she was interested in turning it into a feature. She went away and kind of came up with a different concept, the dystopian concept you see, but still took a lot of that near world sci-fi elements that she'd explored in Awakening, a strong female protagonist, kind of playing with some pre-concepts within her work. And we started developing Night Raiders together, and we worked on the script for 4 or 5 years with the support of the now defunct Harold Greenberg Fund, which supported so many tremendous films here, and it's incredibly sad that it's gone. But yeah, we just took our time working through the script, and she worked with her father on some of the Cree concepts and the language to kind of help inform that story. And when we felt like we had a story that we were ready to share, then we started kind of bringing it out and going, okay, I think we have a film. So that was the origin of it.
And now we go to Ivory Coast with Yanick Létourneau with Knights of King, La Nuit des Rois. Philippe Lacoste, it's his second feature film as a director. How did you get involved in this co-production with Ivory Coast, France, and Canada? Oh, and you microphone.
Yes, sorry.
Voilà.
And Senegal. It's also a co-pro with Senegal. Well, I've been involved in working with the African continent since more than 20 years. My mother lived in Burkina Faso in West Africa for some 10 years. And so I established a lot of relationship with the producer institution that do cinema. So I've been close to everything that has been happening in terms of filmmaking. And I had seen the first film that was produced by Philippe Lacoste called Jassa a pris le feu, which was at TIFF in 2012, I think. And I'd followed his career. I saw that he made Run in 2014, that was in Cannes. And when I was there in 2017 in Cannes, I was at an event, and I was with a friend of mine, Angèle Diabang, who's a Senegalese producer. And she introduced me to Philippe, and I had heard of his new project, and I was fascinated by the subject matter. The way that I had heard about it was more about the political crisis in 2010 that happened over there because of electoral fraud, apparent fraud or whatever. And so I followed that very much. I was intrigued by what he wanted to do. And so as soon as we started talking, we felt that, he was usually films from West Africa, the Francophone part, their first partner is always France. So there's rarely Canadian producers involved on West African films. So he was happy to have a Canadian that was interested in this project, and happy that we would be able to bring a different way of doing things than the way they're used to, either in West Africa or France. So that was the opportunity for us to bring like a very good DP, Toby Marie Robitaille, Hope Foglia, who's an amazing editor, Pierre Gelaudet for the sound design, Olivier Larry, who did the music and who's one of our good collaborators. So it was for us the possibility of collaboration with technicians and a team from Senegal, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Canada, France, to have this. It was just great. So that's how we started, and that's why there was really a genuine interest. That, okay, if we work together, we can really do something different here, and that's what we strive to do. And I'm very happy of how it turned out.
Rightly so. Let's hear from Shasha Nakhai. So Scarborough, based on this book by Catherine Hernandez, Portrait of Three Low-Income Family in Scarborough, brought together through community. Do you remember the first time you read the book, Shasha?
I do. So I had known Catherine for a long time, just through the Filipinx arts community in Toronto. She was in my first student film 14 years ago. And then 8 years ago, Real Asian paired us together to work on a dance film. And she really liked working with my partner, Rich, and I. When the book came out, she sent us a copy and said, please give this a read. I have a bunch of production companies trying to option this, but I really want to work with you guys. And we were like, we can't access this telefilm. We don't know, like we can't, we're documentary people. And then she explained why, and, she really, really wanted to take a documentary style approach. This is her neighborhood. She didn't want giant trailers occupying all the sidewalks and tearing buildings down and putting things up. She didn't want a disruptive presence, and she wanted it to feel like a documentary. And so we had conversations and we decided to work together on adapting the book.
And you're also co-directing with your partner, Rich Williamson. How was that to have those two hats at the same time?
I firmly believe that you can be a director and a producer, maybe not both at the same time on the same set. The only way we were able to do this was because we had an associate producer, Kenya Jade Pinto, and she would often assist with swapping the producer hat when it was time to direct and work with actors and stuff like that. So we all did a lot of roles, but I think a key part of being able to direct and produce was having Kenya Jade on the team.
Can I ask the other panelists, how do you work with your directors? What's the relationship, and how involved are you in the creative decision and on the day-to-day making of the film? Maybe let's start with Luc, who produced many films, who has many films on his filmography.
It depends on who you're working with and on what type of project and what's the director's experience. We tend to be more, I would say, slightly more involved and a little bit more guiding with first-time directors, and as we build a relationship with directors and as their crafts gets better and better, at some point we are there mostly to support their vision. And obviously if we rework with people, it's because we like their work and their vision, and share a vision for the project per se. But I would say it depends.
How about you, Tara?
I think I agree with Luc 100%. Like, each project has its own needs, whether it's heavy in VFX or, dealing with cross-cultural collaboration. But I think what's most important is that creative alignment from the beginning, and really taking the time to understand the director's vision and making sure that you're able to hold and protect that throughout. And if it is going to need to be compromised because of budget or weather or whatever, that you're in lockstep in making those decisions. So I think really giving that time off of the top to understand what's important to the director, why it's important, and so that you can be a truly helpful collaborator.
How did it go for you, Garrett? How involved were you on WILDHOOD?
Extremely involved, and that's a testament to Brett's willingness to allow people into that space with them. both kind of scripted projects that I've done. I did a Talent to Watch web series that I co-created with the writer-director. And then with WILDHOOD, I've just been fortunate to be in collaboration with artists who, again, I go back to the fact that I'm working with friends first. And I think a part of that friendship is built on mutual trust of taste. And with both of those projects, and especially with WILDHOOD, Brett really trusted me to bring my experience as an actor in analyzing character to going deeper with Link's, just with Link's, not even journey. It was the obstacles that Link faces and how he overcomes those obstacles. Just through my work as analyzing scripts as an actor, I was just able to bring a little bit of that to the development, and I do look for that willingness to collaborate in the projects that I take on. I just think it's more fun, and the logistics part of producing is something that I'm good at, but it's not my favorite thing, and so I really want there to be space for my creative voice to have some kind of impact on the story. But the project that was just submitted to me that I'm now taking on, that's come in very developed. And so and it's equally exciting to me. But I guess because I'm emerging and I've only done a few projects, it was interesting to me, or it was more exciting to me to get projects where I could be a little bit more involved to build on that skill set.
And Yanick, with a co-production, right away, you're more than one producer. How involved are you, and how involved can you be?
Well, it really depends on the projects. It depends on the type of co-production. What was interesting in this case is that we came on board early in the process. So there was a first or second draft, I don't remember, but it was a good script on the table, and we all read it and we exchanged with our partners in France and Philippe, and that's where I like to be involved, is everything leading up to the first day of principal photography. After that, I feel that I'm not the most useful person except to extinguish fires and take care of emergency administration and financial stuff. But before that, to me, that's where the creative input happens, and that's what I like to do. And it goes from the giving comments and notes on the script, trying to really make sure that we're all on the same page and working towards the same vision, and also to bring different sensibility in terms of team, like the DP, the editor, what's the right fit? Do they understand the world that we're, so that there is that connection? And so that's really important to me. Finding the people is also a creative thing, because that defines the end product that you're going to deliver to the audience. So yeah, that's
And we need to talk about the money, the financing of those films. Maybe we can start with Tara. And was it hard to finance Night Raiders? Was it a long process, or did it come together fairly quickly?
Well, our show is international co-production as well. It's a co-production with New Zealand. So
and you have some big names co-producing or executive producing. You have Taika Waititi, no?
Yeah. So, and that's an 80-20 co-production split. So, and that came naturally because one of the key characters in the film is Maori, and Dennis had a lot of relationships in New Zealand as well. So That part is challenging. Like it was my first time doing an international co-production, and I trying to make sure that both of the countries, all the pieces and forms and all of that stuff really check out, and the timing of each of those pieces works was far more complicated than I possibly could have anticipated. But on the Canadian side, I think because Harold Greenberg came in early, and then Bell was quite interested, and then so was CBC, we were able to bring on those broadcast licenses early, and then we had XYZ and Elevation also with a lot of enthusiasm early on. So on the Canadian pieces, we had a tremendous amount of support and enthusiasm, and those partners really, really helped.
How was it for you, Shasha? I know the book is beloved. It must have been a good calling card to get meetings.
Not really. I mean, it's a first feature. It's a first feature. So, and it's a talent to watch project, right? So, Telefilm Talent to Watch doesn't really play with anything else, and I didn't really know that. So it was quite challenging at the time, especially because this was like the first iteration of the Talent to Watch program. It's changed many times and is now different this year. But yeah, so we had support from Telefilm Canada through Talent to Watch. We got a teensy amount of support from the Toronto Arts Council, a teensy amount of support from the CFC Slate Fund, and we got a lot of in-kind support from our community partners. So that's like Scarborough Arts and Carey's Place Autism Services, and a lot of loans and deferrals. That's how we made that film happen.
How about you, Garrett?
I have to kind of echo Tara in that we really had a lot of support from the Canadian system for this film. Part of, I think, why I was so excited about it being my first feature was that we were financing at a time when Telefilm had just launched the new Indigenous feature film fund, and there unfortunately isn't really a precedent for Indigenous films of this scale coming out of Nova Scotia and for the Mi'kmaq community, and so it being a coming of age story and an Indigenous story set in Nova Scotia, it just met a need that had been underserved for a long time. And so our financing partners we were lucky in that the first applications that we made to Telefilm, CMF, Shaw Rocket were all accepted for basically the amounts that we had applied for. And really, thank God for Shaw Rocket Fund, because they filled a huge hole for us. And also Marinez Lenton who was at CBC at the time, was just such a quarterback for this film. She gave us some development funding in the last round of development of the script that really allowed us to do a huge casting search that had really never been done in Nova Scotia before. So without her support, and without that license fee that was triggered at CBC, it really did a domino effect, and I'm extremely grateful to her for it.
Luc, was it a quick financing of Les Oiseaux Ivres, or was it a slow process?
It was actually a pretty quick financing. I think we may have had to apply a few times, but it was very straightforward with Telefilm, and Sadek was on board quite early in the movie. We had a good distributor with a decent MG that showed market confidence in the movie, and I guess with Yvonne's the success of his first movie, our track record, I have to say it wasn't. They're always difficult, but it went fine.
And Yanick, with those different countries collaborating on this project, how did you pull this stuff together?
It happened quite quickly, actually, and that was surprising because the experience that I had with projects related to Africa with the African cast are usually very difficult. There's a lot of prejudice against African films, unfortunately, in the market by distributors mostly and sales agent. But we were able early on in the process with us and our partner in France to secure Memento International for the sales agent. And we secured RIMAGE, which is a European fund to which Canada contributes, that we got along with our partners. And we also secured the national funds in Ivory Coast, which was very decent. And we managed to raise a budget of close to 4 million, which we're very proud of because it's really difficult usually for African cinema. So yeah, and about 21% of that comes from Canada.
And so you said earlier you brought some crew with you, and some parts of the film in post were done in Montreal, I believe.
Yeah.
Night of Kings, it's in a prison. There's this whole storytelling aspect. The guy has to tell a story whole night long if he wants to live. Literally, it's like a Scheherazade kind of story. But how is it to bring crew to Ivory Coast? It's not a country that produced a lot of cinema. How is it on the ground making the film for you and your team?
It's very difficult because there's not much infrastructure. Just a small anecdote, just for the lights, we were quoted $500,000 for the lights. So, and it was like very old lights. So we needed to bring like lamps, special digital lamps that are very small, that work in a complicated environment. All the way from Canada, and we had somebody that was specialized to work with these types of lighting, and we had like crews from Senegal and Ivory Coast that knew how to work with the equipment they had over there available. So it was a mix of high tech, low tech, and we made it work. It was really a work of collaboration, and the DP was detrimental because he was kind of a natural leader on this production, and everybody was behind him because he was very humble and had a vision for the film he wanted to preserve for the director. So it went well.
Look, there's a part of film shot in Mexico. How was it to have this part of the film done abroad? Tell us about your experience.
It was actually a really, really terrific experience. I have to admit, we had an incredible partner over there. We worked with a company called Pimienta Films. They are the producers of Roma. They were, on a roll, I would say, and so they got us to work with a tremendous crew there, and it wasn't possible to make an official co-pro, but just getting them on board and them also being a part of the Mexican aspects of the movie just made it so much better, and it was a terrific experience working over there.
Garrett, I think you mentioned Nova Scotia doesn't have the biggest film scene of all of Canada. So was it a challenge to produce a film in the Atlantic provinces?
So just to be clear, Nova Scotia does have a great film scene. It was just in terms of the history of having done Indigenous films in Nova Scotia. And the experience was great, but it was a huge challenge. So we filmed, we were one of the first films in Canada once COVID kind of took over to get into production, one of the first telefilm-backed films anyway. And that was because Nova Scotia in the summer of 2020 emerged to be kind of this COVID paradise for a little while, where there was so few case numbers that our financing partners and the bank felt safe for us to do this movie, which was mostly outside, for us to do it. And when in those like early stages of COVID, when we were all figuring out protocols and whatnot, it was a stressful experience to feel confident as a first feature film producer that I was going to pull this off and that everyone was going to be safe while doing it. And so also because it emerged as one of the safest places, then a lot of film productions came there and scooped up all the crew. And so I had all these keys in place like many months in advance, and then they all got poached one by one. And then we had to use crew that were less experienced. And the hardest part about making the film was we lost our location manager on a road movie. And so I then became the location manager and the picture vehicle coordinator on a movie shot outside of Halifax in a remote location with many remote locations. And it just was all this responsibility that I didn't anticipate being kind of the quarterback for, because it was a well-funded movie. Like we were really lucky and to get a really great budget for it. And so I thought, okay, well, this is going to be a great opportunity for me to really kind of be by the monitor and like support Brett as much as possible. But that I supported Brett in different ways and just in order to kind of make our days and whatnot. But it was it's the hardest thing that I've ever done by tenfold. And I'll be honest, I never want to take on that much responsibility again on another film. I was like kind of a traumatic experience. I won't lie, it was. And but thank God that we ended up with the material that we did, and that we had some key partners like Guy Godfrey, our DP, who really helped share some of the load.
But films that were shot during the pandemic, such a big part of the budget had to go to protection and masks, and everything was slower. So it ate at the part of the budget. Yanick, I think you shot before. It was all filmed before, and I hope so, because a prison is so dense, it would have been impossible.
Yeah, we shot before, but we got hit while in post, and it made things more difficult because of the travel of the director, because everything from the offline edit to the online, everything was done in Montreal. So it was complicated to deal at that point, but we managed through it. And
did everyone else shoot during the pandemic? How about you, Shasha, for Scarborough? With the kids?
Yeah, our film is shot 38 shoot days from August of 2019 to August of 2020. So our final 5 shoot days they were scheduled for March 15th of 2020. And 2 days before our final block of filming, of course, the lockdown happened. So we had to cancel everything. And the children were growing very, very quickly, and we were just like, oh, maybe we'll just never finish the film, or we'll have some bizarre ending that's like 5 years in the future. Or so for a while we just kind of let go, and like everybody else, we're in lockdown. But we started seeing productions go back in the summer, and we started seeing how they were handling the protocols, and then we finished in August of 2020.
How about you, Tara?
We finished shooting just before the pandemic. Like Yanick, post was affected, in particular because we were supposed to be doing it in New Zealand, and I thought I was going to be in New Zealand doing a Lord of the Rings tour and having the greatest time of my life, but instead was on my laptop at home trying to listen to our composer. So
next film you'll do your tour. Yeah.
Everything moving out is definitely going to be a New Zealand co-production, but yeah, so only our post was affected. Yeah.
And Luc?
We shot most of it in 2019. We had a couple of days left. We were going to go shoot in China, actually, in January of 2020. And, you know, we were that close to going. And just a few weeks before Yvan and Sarah were going to go there, it just started to, you know, unfold. And we ended up shooting those 2 days in Montreal, shooting for China in Montreal. It was a challenge. We were also some of the first production to shoot under COVID in June of 2020, and it was quite stressful, quite complicated. Just the unknown, just not knowing, you know, what we were against, and still there were a lot of mystery around the virus, and so it was stressful. And then post just dragged on for almost a year instead of, you know, the 5 or 6 months that we were going to have. It was never ending. It was a pain, but it was fine. It was okay.
Let's keep talking about challenges that you encountered making the film. Let's talk about Scarborough. I know that working with kids can be a challenge. As you say, they grow up very fast. I guess you have to budget for time to improvise and to care for their feelings when the scenes are a bit intense. Was that part of the challenge of making Scarborough, or was it something that went really well and the challenge was somewhere else?
We had a lot of ridiculous things that happened. I would say a lot of the challenges do stem from the fact that nobody was there. There wasn't enough of us, and we weren't being paid enough, and we didn't have enough resources. So we were all wearing many, many hats. But, you know, I will say it was an added challenge to work with the kids, because even though it was a completely non-union production, we still did the ACTRA guidelines for kids. And so we could never go over the 8 hours. And then every like 40 minutes, we'd have to take a break. So even if we would be, you know, on a roll, it was like getting really good, we always have to be like, okay, so the kids have to have their break. And so that definitely added a layer of challenge, but I don't think it was the most challenging thing that we dealt with.
What was it?
Many things swirling together. Yes.
Tara, you have a film set in the future. It's ambitious. Was it part of the challenge to create that world?
Well, Dan has always wanted the world to feel really kind of natural and like tactile. So the biggest kind of sci-fi elements, I guess, were the drones and the drone design. And even though we literally built the drones so that you could kind of feel it within the film. So that wasn't a big challenge. Kind of two other challenges I can say is, one, I'm from Winnipeg, Danis is from Saskatchewan, and we really had intended this film to be shot in the prairies. We actually tried to set it up in Winnipeg and weren't able to do it, and had to move provinces into Ontario and then relaunch it here, which was an incredible amount of labor and hand-wringing. So that was a huge challenge. And on a personal level, we actually got news from Telefilm that we'd been approved 2 days after I'd given birth. And so I actually did the film with a newborn and just breastfed in the back of transpo vans and kind of pushed through because the timing was that. So on a personal level, it was a big challenge. Yeah.
Luc, for Drunken Birds, there are those gorgeous, beautiful shots on the farm that are all at magic hour, but I can imagine that gives you a very short period of time to film every day, and you need light and you need to be very efficient. Is that stressful for a producer to know that you're going to have an hour and a half window to film those cue scenes?
Yeah, that was one of the main challenges. I would say that both Sarah, well, I mean, Yvan is also a DP. Yvan, the director, is also a DP. So we were dealing with two quite gifted, quite ambitious DPs, and we shot the film on 35 millimeter, and we it was one of the reasons why we were so drawn to this project, was that we felt it would you know, be a real movie for theaters and for cinemas, and that it would look amazing, which we still think it does. But it made it quite complicated, and it was and Yvan is a incredibly gifted director, but very ambitious and very how do you say, he really wanted to make the most of every day. And some days, you know, it meant shooting at magic hour for 45 minutes, but you know, waiting with a full crew for a few hours before it was the right time to shoot. And it made for long days, and
finding the actors to be the migrant workers, was that a challenge?
It was also a very big challenge. There's not so much a big Latin American community in Montreal, and we were quite, you know, in the end, quite lucky. We found some of them are professionals, some are non-professionals, but they were all incredibly committed to the project, and it turns out, I think, quite well in the end. But it was a challenge finding those, you know, 12, 15 guys that are not necessarily, you know, that don't have that much to say or do, but are in so many shots.
Yanick, we covered part of the challenging aspect of Nights of King, but there's also the fact that you have this monstre sacré coming from France. You have Denis Lavant coming for a few scenes, and you have this very dense prison with so many characters. Tell us about all those aspects that just build on each other to make this film.
Well, I think what was the most difficult for me was that, you know, it was a co-production, but the production company in France was the wife of Philippe Lacote, Delphine Jacquet, and Philippe was the director. So, and he's the one who co-founded Wasakara production in Ivory Coast. So that was, and it was their first time they were really not only co-producing between themselves, they were actually co-producing with somebody else. And it was the first film of Delphine. So of course, there was a lot of challenge in terms of like just understanding the dynamics of this complex co-production, 4 countries with multicultural crew. So I think that was the biggest challenge, how to, you know, and also it's not because you speak French as a Quebecer that we all speak the same French, and things don't mean the same thing in France and in Quebec and in Ivory Coast and in Senegal. So there was a lot of communication needed, so we were all on the same page. I think that was the biggest challenge.
I'm going to ask Garrett, we talked about all those challenges for you, and that film WILDHOOD, as those beautiful teenagers, two-spirit, finding each other, finding themselves, finding his mother. And I think I'm going to ask this question to you and Tara as well. There's something quite precious about what the film is about. Did you feel that it was especially important to do it right? Was there a little stress of we must do it and we must do it right?
Big time, absolutely. There are so few two-spirit films that have been made that to get the opportunity to make a two-spirit Mi'kmaq film was always, I mean, the reason why it was so important for us to film in 2020 was because we had spent, like Shasha, so much time in finding the cast, and we were really conscious that if we didn't film this movie, which had to be set in summer, we'd waste a whole other year and they wouldn't be the same.
They wouldn't be teenagers anymore.
Exactly. And so it was paramount that we film at that time. And I knew, based on the cast that we had found, that we had the possibility of showing something really special in the chemistry of these boys and in this cast. So the entire time when it was kind of up in the air of whether this film was going to happen or not in 2020, one of the driving forces for me, for sure, was the fact that so few of these films have been made, and we have to do it right. Not for even the Mi'kmaq community or the Two-Spirit community, or it just for the next generation, and to inspire youth across all communities who may identify as queer or Indigenous, or to see themselves for the first time on screen like this. And that's ultimately why I do what I do.
How about you, Tara? And the film was released, and there was the graves that were found all summer. So there was a timing issue too with your film that made it even more relevant, I guess, than when you first started working on it.
Yeah, I mean, 150,000 approximately children were taken. And so we had that history, of course, with us. So those graves existed, and it wasn't new information that they existed, but certainly reckoning with them being excavated was a huge part of our processing around the release. But I would say, you know, when Danis and I decided to work together, we recognized we were working cross-culturally, and I saw the immense responsibility she had to her own community, along with the fact that she was a first-time feature filmmaker on this journey. So she was carrying these two giant burdens. And as generous as she was, I didn't want to put the burden of her having to also educate me constantly throughout. So I really endeavored to educate myself and take on that responsibility, and do what I could to help shoulder that with her. We did do a couple of things that really helped with that. One, we did use pathways and protocols in making the film, and we brought in a consultant for kind of a half-day training that was mandatory for all crew and cast. And we went through pathways and protocols, and also put the film in a historical context so that everyone working on the film could really understand why it might be heavy for some of the actors and Indigenous folk working on the film, and help us hold that. And two, I had an amazing associate producer in Eva Thomas, who came on early to the film and worked alongside me, and then also built out an Indigenous mentorship program that was actually a mix of Maori and local Indigenous folk from Ontario who participated in the making of the film, gained experience, and it was just tremendously helpful to have such a large Indigenous presence on the set. So we had many other, you know, we had elders involved, we smudged, and we had, you know, a lot of different kind of cultural protocols available throughout the filming. But I would say overall, Eva really helped me shoulder some of that, and my other co-producer, Paul.
I have someone in the conversation saying, go Eva. So
yeah, she's
Garrett,
a wonderful producer.
I saw you nod along what Tara was saying. Were those questions you had on your set? How do we get to not have to constantly teach the crew about what we're trying to do, and trying to say how to make sure that everyone's on the same page, and not putting the burden on the director to educate people?
I would say that those conversations, I mean, I definitely was aware of that going into production, but I will say that all of the crew were just so on board to make this really unique and special film for the area. And whenever we onboarded any of the crew, there was just such excitement to be a part of this special film. And so we, that never really was an issue for us to educate any of the crew, or that we needed to to do that. I mean, yeah, I think everyone was just so aware that this was kind of a groundbreaking film for Nova Scotia.
Mm-hmm. People watching us, don't hesitate to ask questions. There's a little Q&A, mine is in French, Q&A button. You can just enter your questions. I have one already that I'm going to ask right away. At the beginning of the conversation, when I asked you all how you got involved on your projects, many of you said, oh, it's the director's a friend, or we've been working together for a long time. We've known each other for a long time. So the question here is, what about a newer emerging creators who doesn't have history, relationships? How do you get to be seen? How do you get your production on the radar? Let's ask the question first to Luc, because you've produced many films. How have you sometimes, I don't have your filmography under my eyes right now, but first-time filmmakers, how do they get on your radar?
Usually with really good short movies. We are quite busy, but approachable, and I mean, we're open to considering all sorts of projects from newcomers, but I have to admit, with the relationships we have with, you know, ongoing relationships with some directors, unfortunately, there's a little bit less room for those than when we were starting out. But yeah, I mean, you have to. I think the more important thing is to have, of course, an accomplished first project. But if you are going to come to us or to, you know, any producer with some type of a calling card, with something that, you know, shows for your talent, that's probably the best way, I think, to start out.
I'm asking the question to Yanick as well, because I think Philippe Lacote, who directed Night of Kings, is an interesting case as well, that he started producing films in Ivory Coast, then he made the first feature, and you got to know him through festivals. So it's true, he kind of made a room for himself, and then you met him. Yes,
but he was kind of in the circle of people who are interested in African cinema. So I know a lot of people that we know in common, and it was only a 1 degree of separation. So, you know, I felt like I knew him, although I didn't know him. You see what I mean? He's like part of this circle of friends and colleagues.
Don't hesitate to ask us questions. I will start to ask more of them at this point. We're talking about getting the film done. Let's talk about getting the film seen, because, well, there's been a pandemic. Festivals were online, theaters shut down, then reopened, then re-shut down, then reopened. Now here we are. How has it been a challenge? Let's carry on with Yanick. I remember seeing Nights of King at TIFF online.
Well, we did the premiere.
Yeah.
We did the premiere at the Venice, and then at TIFF. And then we had several others. We did Sundance. We did so many, more than 80 film festivals, and the big ones, and all to the smaller ones. So that was amazing. And right after the Venice screening, we got a few offers, but the most interesting one was from Neon in the US. So, and it was also the choice of our sales agent. So we went for Neon, and that I think contributed to change the career of the film, and really pushed it out there, especially it's weird because it's a Francophone film, but we definitely had more press and more interest in English language territories for some odd reason, which is very fascinating to me. And the film ended up being on a lot of like top 20 best film of the year, from the BBC to Variety to Rolling Stone magazine. And then there was the race for the Oscars, and all that contributed to generate interest. And that's the time when Neon decided to release the film in the US. So that was the first territory where the film was released. Unfortunately, most of the theaters were closed. The biggest numbers we managed to open in Canada like a week or two after the US. And the place in Canada, in North America, where we made the most money box office for the film was actually Montreal. So that was pretty amazing, because it shows that there are real cinephiles in Quebec and in Montreal, and that makes a difference for anything that is non-English, non-US content. So
and you said that the race for the Oscars for Ivory Coast, and we have the race for the Oscars for Canada with Drunken Birds. How did that impacted the release of your film, Luc?
It gave the movie, sort of a different profile on the market, but I have to admit that the pandemic, I think it made it a lot more difficult for the film internationally than what we were expecting. We were going to maybe be in a non-pandemic year, we would have been done with the movie probably sometime like in July or August of 2020. So we'd had started, talking to fall festivals, fall of 2020, and a lot of festivals saw an early cut. And we're quite interested in the film in a bizarre year where a lot of movies weren't ready, and we ended up I think they were looking for movies, and we eventually realized, because of all these delays, that we would not be ready in time for September. In fact, we finished the movie sometime in March of 2021. Something like that. And 2021 was kind of the opposite. There were all these movies that got delayed, and they were all coming, to festivals at the same time. And festivals were still quite smaller in scope. All these festivals that usually show, 200 or 250 movies were actually showing 50 or 100. And it was a rough road. We were quite happy, we premiered the movie in the platform competition at TIFF, but internationally it was a rougher road than what we envisioned. Getting selected as the Canadian candidate for the Oscar race enabled us to get invited in several festivals. We ended up making a sale in the US, but to a very small distributor, to be quite frank. They're releasing the movie in the next few weeks. But again, distributors around the world had all these movies on their shelves. They weren't shopping that much. And I guess a smaller movie like ours, didn't end up being bought around the world as much as we would have hoped for.
Night Raiders was a co-production, Tara, with New Zealand. Was the film released there already?
It just was released. Like Luc was saying, we were, quite depressingly impacted by COVID. And Luc, I just want to say that's such a shame, because your film is so beautiful.
Thank you.
And so we sold to Goldwyn in the US, and we're on Hulu right now. We had our international premiere at Berlinale, which I watched through my phone while in my bedroom. The programmer walked me through the crowd, so that was thrilling.
Still not going on the road trip in Germany, of course.
I was not in. I maybe drank a German beer by myself, and and then we had a gala presentation at TIFF, which was in person, and it was the first time we were able to be in person. Our cast came in, and we truly got to celebrate, which was fantastic, and almost a catharsis after going through this, like everyone else, these elongated processes because of COVID. So it was our kind of one little group outing, and then we all went back into our holes as COVID revived itself. So yeah.
Scarborough is being released now, if I'm not mistaken. So how was the process of releasing the film for you, Shasha?
Yeah, I think we've just kind of tapered out. We have a couple more cities left, but it's still screening in Scarborough right now. I learned a lot through this process. I mean, we were kind of working in a vacuum, you know, in the pandemic, and I didn't really know that for fiction films, you're supposed to get a sales agent like immediately when you find out that you get into TIFF. I was just like focused on finishing the film, to be honest, because we finished the film like right before TIFF. And so you know, we signed with Level, which have been wonderful. They've really been working closely with us and listening to our requests. But we still don't have US or international distribution. And that's kind of something I gather, you know, a lot of like Luke mentioned, a lot of the distributors have backlog. We also don't have any stars. Additionally, during TIFF this year, not a lot of the US and international sales agents actually came here. So they didn't really actually get to hear the word of mouth buzz and actually get affirmation that this is a film that can do well with very diverse audiences around the world. So yeah, we've yet to crack that challenge.
So you say it's still screening in Scarborough. Was there some kind of community outreach to get the film seen by the people of Scarborough?
And it was really just me pestering John Bain at Level and saying, hey, did you book Scarborough yet? Did you book Scarborough yet? Because, you know, it's Cineplex and, you know, they believe in Marvel, the one true holy Marvel. And so it just took some, you know, some convincing. But that was the best screening we've had so far, and it was wonderful. We went there for the theatrical premiere, and it's just up the street from where we filmed, so it was wonderful.
And going back to Tara, is there some community outreach into Indigenous communities with Night Raiders?
Yeah, the Indigenous Screen Office and CMF both supported us, and we actually have, through the ISO, another community screening, 3 more happening this year. So it's been tremendous going into these Indigenous communities and sharing the film. Their enthusiasm and curiosity has been really heartwarming. Yeah.
Same question to Garrett. Is there a strategy to reach those communities with WILDHOOD?
Yeah, we're actually working on a strategy right now to bring the film to Mi'kmaq communities this summer. Can't talk too much about that yet. But just to go back to the initial question, it's been a roller coaster ride for this film's reception. It's really interesting to kind of be a first-time producer in this time and kind of temper your expectations, I guess, because I thought, you know, we had the film in First Look, this telefilm First Look that enabled us to get the interest of Films Boutique, a sales agency, a fantastic sales agency out of Germany. And so we were going into TIFF with that support. And then, as Shasha said, then a lot of people didn't watch a lot of the TIFF films. And so that platform was a little bit muted. However, the film's festival reception has been fantastic. It's played at so many festivals across the world. Through its LGBT and kind of more traditional circuits. And that's, I think, part of the strength of the film is that it really kind of boards those communities really well. And so it opened up festival platforms for us. And the great thing about TIFF, though, too, is it really spurred the interest of basically every distributor in Canada, because we went into the into TIFF without a distributor locked. So that was great. But it's more so getting it to the actual audience that's hard in box office terms. That I can't, I don't think anyone has the secret kind of success on how to get butts in seats right now. And so we've just kind of launched, Mongrels launched it in Canada about 3 weeks ago. And, you know, the numbers are pretty shocking. And this film has had so much press. And I thought that that would lead to kind of great box office success, but it's tough. Audiences are really comfortable in their homes and watching stuff on streaming. And I don't know how we're gonna fix that problem in the future, but I hope everyone kind of refines the love of seeing films in cinemas, because it's super important in terms of making money back for these films. And and it's important for the communities that the film represents to be able to see themselves on a big screen, you know? So I just don't want to lose that. And it's just been weird navigating this experience.
So I have this big question asked by someone watching. The question is, what are the biggest hurdles developing and funding films in Canada? What are the areas in the industry in terms of funding, creative, mentorship, talent that needs to be improved? Could it be distribution? I don't know. I'm asking Luc.
I was kind of nodding. Very broad question.
I know.
The hurdles. I'm not too sure. What I can say about that is that we're at a crossroads, I think, right now, and the industry and the environment is changing every 6 months. It seems like it's a little bit different in terms of, you know, what works and where does it work, and where are people watching movies, except Netflix, of course. But so it's kind of difficult to say. I'm not sure what to say.
Maybe what is your I'm going to ask everybody the biggest frustration or the one thing you wished had been easier or you received more help. Is there something you can narrow it to, Tara?
I referenced it earlier, but I think that the death of the Harold Greenberg Fund for English Canada is tremendously sad. Almost every feature film in Canada has, on the English side at least, has received support from them. And I look to the French system and see the level of support for development of feature films from all levels of talent. And I think I'm just so saddened by it. I will say the 5 films nominated this year, I do think it is a watershed moment. These are incredibly diverse stories that have been nominated. And I think it's a real testament to the changes our industry has gone through. I know we have a lot more work to do, but it's just one positive I think it's worth noting.
Well, it is a big and broad question, and you know, I'm going to ask Shasha, but as a first film, and you said small budget, and that's a program that's ever changing, I guess that you've experienced a way of making film that is not necessarily standard, let's say, or that is that had a lot of challenge already, a lot of hurdles.
Sorry, what was the question?
Well, you know, I'm trying to ask everyone about the biggest challenges encountered, or the things that needs to be improved is the question the person watching just asked. But like you said, yeah. you experiment a way of making films through a certain program that can be improved.
Yeah, and I think that actually a lot of the biggest issues I had with the program that we went through in 2018 have now been addressed in the iteration, thanks to much advocacy work done by organizations like REMC and Impact. But if just having a mentor or exec producer, I think would have been very helpful. You know, we lost out a lot of community, right? Just running into someone and someone saying, hey, maybe you should think about getting a sales agent now that you're in this festival. You know, just like we share a lot of information when we run into one another. And I think it would have been helpful to have someone kind of making suggestions along the way. Yeah. And I think that has been addressed in the newest iteration of this program.
But being a first-time producer for a feature film, Garrett, did you share that desire maybe to have mentorship in a way or another? Or did you have that?
I've been so fortunate that I've had a fantastic mentor in Damon De La Vera, who I met at the CFC in the producers lab. My strategy for going to this producers lab was kind of to have Damon as a mentor, and it worked out. And so I would not for sure have been able to navigate the business affairs needed for having all these different partners on this film without his experience. We closed the financing, and then because, like you said earlier, we needed to raise all this new financing for these COVID protocols. He was instrumental in helping us make connections with folks who brought more money to the table, and our existing financiers also increased kind of their investment to cover those. But no, I've been extremely fortunate in that way to have Damon along for the entire experience, and he's a really involved executive producer, creatively, financially. So yeah, I feel very, very fortunate in that way. I think just to go to your other question though, of what can be improved, the biggest thing that needs to be improved is just the theatrical Canadian value formula. Like how can we make these Canadian films, how can we make Canadian audiences really excited about supporting Canadian films? And I know that's like a kind of existential question that I think people have been asking for a long time, but it really needs to try to be answered, because it's super important to have that support, and not to just have the support from the industry. Sometimes I think it's really easy to feel like, oh, your Canadian film is doing extremely well because you're hearing kind of it from the industry, but then that message is actually not going broader into the smaller Canadian communities that really form the bulk of what Canadian audiences are,
Yanick, what should be improved?
Well, I think we should have more diversified cinema in all aspects, in front and behind the camera. And I think that, it's being a stronghold of a minority producing films for over so long in the past. And that is slowly changing, but changing. And I think, people want to see, like, what I watch on TV and on streamer is more international content from the UK, from the US. And it's difficult for me to find the content that I can relate to in Canada, whether in French or English. There are incredible stuff, but I think we need to do, the doors need to be more open. So there's more space and new stories that we've never heard from people who had never had that opportunity. And I hope to see all those new voices more.
Mm. You said many of your films were co-production with African countries, other countries. Before Nights of King, you had Lemonade with a Romanian director, and right now you have releasing, I think this today in Montreal, Twist à Bamako, Mali Twist by Robert Guédiguian, but in Africa. If you were to make a feature film in Montreal, in Canada, with no outside co-production, no outside funding, no outside input, would it be frustrating for you? Would you miss those other funding, those other ways of making films?
I think that if I was the majority producer and that Philippe Lacote was a Quebec-based director, we'd probably be still struggling to get the financing together to go into production. Because it's not the typical script. It's there's ambition by the director, and il ose. I don't know to translate that. Il ose.
He's daring.
Sorry?
He's daring. He dares.
Yeah, he's daring in his approach, in his storytelling, and we're all able to contribute to his vision. And to me, it shows that it's possible. You don't need $10 million to do it. You can do it with smaller budgets too. And we have the talent in Canada to tell genuine stories in new ways and with new eyes. But we must do away with the old way of doing things, status quo and all that.
Last chance to ask a question to my guests. If you want to ask a question on the little Q&A section of this app. I have one question by Neil Haverty he's asking more about getting things accomplished with the pandemic that sometimes can be quite, it's been hard sometimes to work during the pandemic, and ask what keeps you grinding. But I want to ask the question, let's say more broadly, no pandemic or no pandemic, what keeps you going? What keeps you working on films? Because you have great projects, you look for funding, you don't get it, or you get it after 5-6 years of working on a film, and then the film doesn't make a good box office. And what keeps you going? I guess it's the love of film, but still, what's the carrot that keeps you going, Luc?
Working on a project for several years and finally seeing it with a live audience and feeling that the film connects with the audience is just a unique feeling, and it's I guess it's one of the differences between the different platforms and seeing your film on the big screen with a live audience. You can feel, even though your film is a drama or but you just feel the energy and the reaction in the theater, and a discussion following one of these screenings, and seeing how people are touched by your movie. And challenged, and sometimes it makes them change. It's just the reason why I keep making movies, and I guess it's just to make, even though it may be in a small way, but change our world.
Shasha, what keeps you going?
Throughout lockdown, I mean, very much what Luc said, when your film connects with the people that you made it for. That screening we had in Scarborough was everything. And, we sat next to one of the little stars in the film, and he lives in that neighborhood, and that's where he goes to watch Marvel movies. And he had a little running commentary the entire film. It was wonderful. And that is the perfect example of why we do what we do. In terms of motivating you throughout lockdown or through the slog of the pandemic, I would say it was my commitment to the writer Catherine, my commitment to our crew and actors. They already put so much energy and work, so I owed it to them to do the best job I could do, really, as a producer. So yeah.
Tara?
Well, I agree with Sasha that, the producer cannot crumble. All these people are looking to you and relying on you. And so you may privately go home and wring your hands, but you need to keep putting one foot in front of the other for the sake of all these people. But I think the question gets to the core of why we start the project in the first place. And that's why I think it's so important that you truly believe in the creative and the story, because it is an incredibly long slog and it isn't easy. So that kernel, that little flame that you started at the beginning is what keeps you going.
Garrett, even though you feel like you lost an organ to that film in the process, and that's a very normal feeling to
totally
be traumatized by the first film, but
totally
keeps going.
and I'll just say that I wasn't breastfeeding while making my film, so it's all relative, right? The challenges are all that, all those things that Luke, Shasha, and Tara said, those are what keep me going as well. But when I think about if I ever do that thought of like, oh, maybe I don't want to do this anymore, or well, it's what else would I do? And I, despite how challenging the job can be, it's also we're so fortunate in that the work is varied and it's fulfilling, and it gives you an opportunity to travel and work with interesting people who care about art and care about having conversations that can, like Luke said, help to change the narrative of our society just a little bit for, for a time, a moment, or for, forever. And I think there is so much power in that. And whenever that thought trickles into my head of, maybe I don't want to do this anymore, I really just remind myself that it's actually one of the best jobs in the world.
Last but not least, Yanick.
Thank you. Well, I think the most powerful thing in the world since the beginning of time is storytelling. And Night of the King is a story about the power of storytelling. And I think that's my main motivation, it's such a privilege to be able to bring these stories to life and to share them with the world and try to bring different perspective on the world we live in the country or around the world. And I do believe in the power of film as a strong medium, or the visual medium that can impact. And it's just a matter of finding the right distribution, the right outlet, so that people can see it. And yeah, I strongly believe in that.
We can end with this comment from Lauren McKinley, not a question, but a comment. All of these films are so extraordinary. Congratulations to each of you, and thank you for bringing them to Canada. And I concur. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you for those beautiful films. Good luck for the awards. So with me, Garrett Patrick Paon, producer of WILDHOOD, Shasha Nakhai, producer and co-director of Scarborough, Tara Woodbury, producer of Night Raiders, Luc Déry, producer of Drunken Birds, and Yanick Létourneau, co-producer of La Nuit des Rois, Night of Kings. Thank you so much all for being here. And Mara Gourmercado, I give you the microphone.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you.
Thanks, Claudia.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to thank also, in the name of the Academy, so Garrett, Luc, Shasha, Tara, Yanick, and Claudia, of course, for today's conversation. And another thank you to our partners at the Canadian Media Producers Association for presenting this session today.